Satnam, yogis and yoginis. Hello, welcome back. Welcome to the stream. Let us connect back to the topic of the mind. Let us do one more part on this mind course. This time I said it right. I didn't say mantra course like I generally make the mistake. We're going to be talking today about the problems that arise in dealing with our mind. We have been already touching upon some of these points throughout the different parts of the course, but today we're going to focus specifically what kind of problems arise, how can we deal with them, what tools do we have, tools, tips, and strategies, I put in the thumbnail, do we have from yoga that can help us. If you are online right now, Satnam, hello and welcome. You can say hello in the chat and feel free to share what kind of issues arise in your mind? How can you, what would you be interested in knowing more about the mind itself? Because today we want to dive deep into all the problems. So this is one of the last episodes, let's say, of this course. This is one of the last parts of the course. We're going to be finishing this course very, very soon. And after this course, we're going to go into numbers, Karam Kriya, numerology. And it's going to be a nice connection with the numbers because I will do an introduction on what is numerology, but then we will start with the mind and understanding the mind from the perspective of numbers, which is going to be very useful, all these diagrams and these things that we have been doing. Let's bring numbers into that. And so we will be understanding the mind, but also be understanding numbers at the same time. And when we do that course, we're going to be exploring one aspect of the mind's problems, which is very relevant, which is called mind games or intrigues of the mind. And so we're not going to talk much about this today, but we will definitely be diving deep into that topic in the next course. So that's why I don't want to go too deep into this. Satnam Le Hafakar. I'm still not sure how to pronounce your name, but hello and welcome and glad to see you here. So mind games, what they are is when the mind is playing games with us. It's like when we are trying to justify things, or when we're trying to, when we are feeling insecure, when we are feeling that we feel on top of the world, we feel that we are above others or below others. These ego games, yeah, that the mind plays. And when we are judging others and thinking they are wrong, so they should be punished and taking revenge and these sort of things, a lot of these fall under the category of mind games. So for this specifically, we're going to be dealing with this in the next course in quite a bit of detail. So let's not go into those today. Yeah, but just keep it in mind, this is one of the main problems with the mind. And so we need to deal with that, give it enough space to talk about how to deal with that. So let's say we will be dealing with that on the next course. But let's start by reviewing some of the concepts that we have already been seeing in this course regarding the mind. And we will approach it kind of chronologically from the beginning of the first parts of the course, and then as we were advancing, what kind of problems were arising, because we were understanding the mind from different perspectives, like from the Western and scientific perspective and from the Eastern Indian perspective. And let's review some of the problems that were arising, and let's talk specifically now, what can we do with that? So if you remember, we started from the West, and if you were watching the videos, and in the West, we were talking about how the main difference between the West and the East is that the West has an approach that is bottom up, and the East is a top down. And meaning that bottom up is like the bottom layer is the hardware. Hardware is the brain, right? And the software would be the mind, let's say. And so from the Western perspective, it's like we have a brain, and there's all sorts of connections within the brain with our neurons. And the way it is designed by nature, by evolution, it has created the capacity for intellectual, intelligent, and abstract thought. And so mind is like a consequence of the brain. And through this structure that allows the mind to arise, also somehow consciousness arises out of that. So it's like going from the bottom to the top. While in Eastern perspective, it's more like consciousness is linked to the spirit and it descends, and as it's descending, it's creating the possibility of life. So it's like coming from the divine being, God, creating a creation. It comes from the consciousness that decides to create some sort of creation. So it's like top down. And in some way, from the Indian perspective, the consciousness is most important, because if you remove consciousness, what is the mind? What is the brain? You can have a machine and a body is connected to a machine and is working, but consciousness is not there. So the body is functioning, but there is no one in there. So bottom up, top down. If we go from the Western approach, when we were going to look into the hardware, then we have to look into the brain. And looking at the brain, we looked at a couple of things. And so now let's identify some of the issues that were arising. You will remember this was a triune brain, which I already put a fourth aspect with the separating from the neocortex. We would be also like prefrontal cortex is a specific one. So what was the problems with this? With the fact that this brain is built like this? Hofakar, Satnam, I saw you subscribed. Welcome to the tier 2. Thank you for becoming a member and being a supporter of the channel. I appreciate that you offer your support. This is going to help the channel. And I said the last week that the other week that everybody could join in if they wanted, but it was not activated. I forgot one of the last steps, so now it is active, and so I'm glad to see that you are joining in. So thank you. So when we were looking at this structure, we identified one problem, which is that the inner layer, the first one, the oldest ones, the ancient part of the brain, which is the reptile area, this is so important because it's associated to survival that it's going to overtake whatever is happening here. So if the situation is very critical, this is going to take over, and then we're not going to have an activation of the cortex and neocortex and prefrontal cortex, which is the part of the brain which makes conscious choices. So we are going to be responding, or more like reacting than responding. Remember, reaction and response. And that reaction is generally going to create karma. Yeah. So what's the problem with this? This is not a problem. The structure of the brain is not a problem. The problem arises when we are not in front of a lion, but our brain, our mind actually detects a situation when it's a problem, and then we engage these core structures in the brain that are designed to survive. And it's not a matter of survival. You are not in danger. Your life is not in danger. You're just in front of your boss or your partner or a friend, or there's a conflict. And yet, if we see it as a danger for us, then this mechanism of survival kicks in, and we have no capacity for conscious choice. So the very first aspect that comes up from this, the very first problem that arises is how we are perceiving the world, and particularly how we perceive stressful situations. And notice that the more stressed we are, the more is this active, so the less our capacity to see whether something is stressful or not is on. So let's say if I'm very stressed already, things that are coming to my space are already going to be more stressful as well. So I'm going to be dealing with them in a less conscious way. And consciousness is the key element that can allow us to actually to say, look, this is actually not stressful. This is actually not a major issue. Why are you worrying so much about this? So it's important that we apply the level of consciousness to what is happening and notice and say, well, is my life in danger here or not? Can I deal with this in a more neutral space rather than being in this huge reaction, right? So something happens and it triggers a great emotional reaction. Wait, let's stop, let's breathe, let's perceive what is the issue. Is there a big issue here? Let's deal with it, but let's not engage in such a primal, instinctive way that we cannot have conscious choice. So this would be the first element, to be able to differentiate and distinguish when something is really dangerous from not. So that's regarding this diagram. And that would be also, in order to differentiate whether something is dangerous or not, that's going to come in, that's going to be something that discernment, yeah? And discernment is something that is from Buddhi. So we're going to have to be engaged in Buddhi so that this doesn't become a problem for us. The other diagram that we saw from the Western perspective was the butterfly mind. I'm very happy with this drawing somehow. I had never drawn the brain as a butterfly before, but somehow it made sense the day that I did it. And I'm very glad the way it looked. And here we identified a number of problems. So we already explored quite a bit on these different aspects. So if you want to go more in detail of the problems for this left and right, you can explore that video. Let's just summarize that in our Western education society, we mostly emphasize the left brain. If you in a school, studying language and maths and doing exams and all this evaluating how you're writing, and all this is very left brain oriented. And there is very little margin for arts. Arts in preschool are generally quite strong, and then as soon as you start with the regular educational system, then you start going into this criteria you have to follow every year, and it becomes much more left hemisphere oriented. So by being in the left hemisphere, we are not accessing all these beautiful things from the right side. So creativity and expressiveness, music, imagination, special abilities, emotional processing. So emotional processing, so if we are here, if we are in this level, then it's much harder to deal with emotions, to know how to deal with them. And this is particularly important for men more than for women, because we have already a tendency to go more into the left hemisphere of the brain. So what do we do with this? We balance the brain, and that's where the anuloma viloma, the alternate nostril breathing, and other practices which emphasize both sides of the body and both sides of the like breathing, both sides of the nose, is going to stimulate both hemispheres equally, to balance them, to connect them, so that they can work together. So that's how to avoid becoming, overthinking or rigidity in our thoughts, and having habitual thoughts that we cannot escape from, and being difficult to communicate our emotions. These kind of things that were arising in the left hemisphere. So in order to deal with this, we need to balance it with some right hemisphere, and then having both active. So it's not just to go into this side, but having both active. And I gave some examples in that video on how we can do that, even if you are mathematicians. Let's say I showed an example of a mathematical demonstration that is going to need the engagement of the right hemisphere. So very good. That was let's say the hardware, the bottom layer of the Western perspective of the brain. Now, and as we are arising from brain to mind to consciousness, from the Western perspective and Western understanding, we have psychology studying the different levels of consciousness as the subconscious, semi-conscious, conscious, and all that we explored it in this diagram. Now, what was the issue with this diagram? The issue was that we generally overload the subconscious with garbage, and that's going to be affecting the way we see things, and these little monsters here, insecurity, guilt, shame, these monsters are going to be ruling our life. So what to do with this? We need to clean the subconscious. We're going to see more about this. We need to, let's say, when the subconscious is clean, then guide the semi-conscious thoughts so that we can, from consciousness, choose what we allow to think. So the kind of thoughts that we allow to develop. So this would be the next layer. coming into, I would say, so being able to choose what kind of thoughts do I want to happen. So if a thought is coming from the subconscious, but I don't want it, then as these thoughts are arising here, then I can choose. This is the will. I can choose what is going to happen or what not. If I don't want to nurture that thought, I'm not going to allow it to become feelings and emotional reactions and desire, undoing this whole cycle, which we explored in detail. But if it does come to desire, then we can still apply our will to decide which way to go. So that's that perspective. Coming into this diagram, we explored as well what were the problems with manas, that this is the perception of the outside and it's already filtered. So having a clean filter is important for this, and that's linked to our impressions and our memories. So if we have some traumatic memory stored, then we need to deal with that. Today we're going to talk more about this, about how to deal with that, yeah? And then there is a hankar, there is the ego, so what we identify with, and then the problem that if we let a hankar direct manas, then we go into the outside world and we operate without actually having a discernment whether that's something that we want or not. So we need to awaken buddhi. So less attached to the likes and the dislikes and more awakened through the buddhi to have the discernment. Then we also, in the last video, we were exploring also the different facets and projections and aspects and how some of them may be balanced or imbalanced. And we could deal with those directly if we have one particular, in this case, projection that is imbalanced. We could deal with it directly with a particular meditation and bring it into balance. All right. So this is a number of things that we have already explored. And today we're going to talk a bit more in detail on, for example, how to deal with unwanted thoughts and tips and strategies to deal with the mind in general. So if let's start with the general. In general, one of the first things that we need to take into consideration is that the mind is a tool. Yeah, we call it antakarana, yeah, the inner instrument. Now, this tool is there for serving us. So the first thing we need to be aware of is, has my mind become my master? Because when the mind becomes the master, it becomes a monster. So has my mind become a master? And if so, can I go back to ruling it? Can I go back to learning how to deal with the mind and so put it in my service? The mind is there to serve. And so it's going to need, it wants to help, but it's going to need training. And so training the mind is a very important aspect, yeah? Every time we sit to meditate, it's not just about cleaning the subconscious. That's one of the main important consequences of meditation, but it's also about training the mind to say, look, right now, I'm going to sit down and I'm going to stay still for this number of minutes, and you're going to just help me to do that. And it's a training. It takes time, and it can be frustrating at first. Frustration is one of the steps towards meditation. You can recognize it and say, well, I'm getting frustrated. That's fine. And I will get better as I am improving my training with the mind. It's a matter of discipline. So the first thing is this, is to say, look, you are here to serve me. Can you offer that service? So once we have this agreement with the mind, and for that we need to take command of it, then we do this, like the very basic thing, we talk about meditation, we talk about pranayam. Well, what would be the difference between doing pranayam or doing meditation or doing asanas? So the difference is that the mind is operating in a number of levels. One is purely intellectual thoughts that are happening up here. We need to deal with this in some way. And that's going to require a number of tools that are conscious, that we can apply them when we are having the thought, but it can also be like the meditation to train the mind. So that's this level. But the mind is also on a lower level, let's say. Emotions, yeah? The emotions are moved very much linked to the mind. Whatever we are thinking, this is creating a number of emotions, and whatever our emotional state, that's going to create a certain kind of thinking. So we need to deal with emotions as well directly. But then there's also another level, another lower level, which is physical body. So we have all heard about when if you're very worried about something, you may actually create a disease in your body. Yeah, how is it called? Psychosomatic diseases. So our thoughts have an impact on the body. Body, mind, and spirit is all connected. Yeah. So body, emotions, mind, and spirit. So if some situation happens in life and it's really that difficult, let's talk about trauma. If you have a traumatic experience or just a very painful experience, that's not only going to have an imprint in your mind, it's going to have an imprint on your emotions, and it's going to have an imprint on your physical body. So in the physical body, there is this cellular memory, yeah, and your cells actually store memories, and which means that even, let's say you have, let's put an example to make it easier. Your closest friend, yeah, your most dear friend, the one you confide in, the one that you share your secrets with, the one who knows your intimate soul, and betrays you, and then you feel like it stabbed you in the back, right? And this element of betrayal is with you 24/7. Yeah, it's gonna torture you. It's gonna be feeling like, oh my God, this person I felt so close to. And so there's an element of mental torture going around whatever this person did. Now, after some time, let's say after some years, or after a few months, some people are faster, some people are slower. I'm a particularly slow person on healing these kind of things, but every person has their own rhythm. But let's say after 1 year, you made peace with what happened. You decided that it was also your karma. It had to happen. You had to experience this feeling of being betrayed, and this person was just a vehicle for the karma. And so you make this mental effort to forgive the person. That's here. That's on this level, on the mind. Now, after you forgive the person on an intellectual level, which is necessary, I'm not saying anything bad about that. That intellectual forgiveness has to happen. Yeah, it's necessary. But then there is another emotional level and there is a physical level behind. So after the intellectual deciding that you're going to forgive that person and making a conscious effort to stop thinking badly about them and stop remembering all the pain, still the memory of being betrayed is there, and the emotional charge is going to be there. So for example, you may forgive that person, but next time you have another friend, maybe you are afraid to share some details of your life. And that fear is going to be like an emotion that can arise to the surface, and it can be a memory of whatever happened. So that memory of the emotions, that's emotional level. That's not mental level, it's on an emotional level. I put it on 2 different levels, even though they are very, very connected, yeah? And those emotions, we need to process them. Emotion is emotion, energy in motion. So there has to be some energetic healing that I have to do with emotion. Now, pranayama is particularly useful for that. So if in the mental, intellectual forgiveness level, that's in the mind, that's something that you can do with your mind, thinking about it and going over the situation and deciding that you want to forgive and then making a constant conscious effort to forgive. On the emotional level, you may need to breathe deeply. And when you are feeling the emotion of the fear, which tends to collapse our heart and our lungs, rather than that, just to open it up and breathe and breathe and breathe. And so pranayams are going to be useful to deal with that. And there's a very good number of pranayams in yoga that you would explore depending on the issue that you have to deal with, that one pranayam would be more helpful or another. Maybe you need to explore holding the breath without breath, being without breath, or holding full of breath, or measure your exhale very very long and specific pattern, like inhaling in 1 and exhaling in 4, for example, things like that. And that's going to be healing the something that is associated with their breath, and the breath is connected body, emotions, mind, spirit. So that's going to be very useful. All right. So that's the emotional level. And of course, designing to forgive on the intellectual level, that's going to have an effect also on the emotion. It's going to calm down the emotion over time, but it's going to take time, right? Then there is the physical level. There's the memory, the cellular memory. Being betrayed is like a stab in your back, yeah? Like somebody stabbed you with a knife in the back. And that actually leaves some memory here in your back, so between the shoulder blades. So you can actually do these exercises which, when you are stretching and pressing against those points, which are very important points. I believe in acupuncture as well, that there is a lot of energy channels that flow through the back. And so if there is some cellular memory there regarding that betrayal, you can deal with that through some yogic postures. So for example, putting pressure between the shoulder blades, you can do it like this. So holding the hands behind and stretching the arms and lifting the arms, that's going to put pressure between the shoulder blades, and that may be useful, maybe even bowing down. So sort of like in baby pose, but with the hands locked and above your head. That's going to help release the memory in those cells. So don't be surprised if, 1 year later you forgave the person, but 5 or 6 years later you still find some memory of some pain in there. And it can be felt as pain, and maybe you don't even know why do you feel pain, or where does it come from? Or maybe one day you go to a deep massage and somebody's massaging there and suddenly the emotion comes up. So that's pretty common. And also that we can be, let's not take it as, oh my God, I'm going back, I'm regressing, I'm not advancing, I'm always, going back to the pain and feeling bad with yourself. You made great effort and great advance moving forward and dealing with, the betrayal, and you've managed to forgive. That's great. And then some years later, you find that there's still some memory of it in your body. Okay, why you do? Let's deal with that, right? But don't feel like no matter how much time it passes by, I keep coming back to me being the victim of that betrayal, right? So forgiveness happens on one level, and then it takes time to go through all these levels and to be released. And this is why, one of the reasons why in yoga we have the working on the body, working on the breath, working on the mind, and then all that working on the spirit. So the physical work would be very important. The breath work would be very important. The mind work would be very important. And a good holistic approach and complete practice from the perspective of yoga would incorporate all of them. So this is one of the reasons why when I was a mantra yogi before any other kind of yogi, let's say, and I felt it was not enough. I needed something else, because the mantra yoga was operating on an energetic level on my mind and was meditating, but my physical body needed extra. So the asanas, the postures are going to be helpful to deal with that extra bit that is also necessary. So body, emotions, mind, and spirit, and we need to deal with all of them. And don't be surprised if you have an issue and years later it comes back up. Don't feel like, oh, I haven't made any progress. No, just calm down. It's a memory. It's a residual memory. It's some sort of inertia that still needs to be processed, and that's fine. Let's give it enough time. So when we have some recurring thoughts that are troubling us, it's very common in our society. We say, oh, just breathe deeply, right? But how about move your navel? How about move your body? Yeah, because sometimes maybe those thoughts are arising from the memory in the body. So it's body, navel, breath, and mantra. We say this is like the 3 levels, and it would be like operating on this level, on this level, and on this level. And I would say like the body, the emotions, and the mind. So navel, breath, and mantra. If you have some issue you don't know how to resolve, make sure you're moving your navel and chant with your navel and do postures and breath work on your navel, but then also breath to work on the emotions, and then chant some mantra and meditate to deal with the mind. So that would be the 3 levels for that. All right. Okay. I think that's pretty good, comprehensive. All right. What else? Well, we talked about the body and the mind. I didn't mention much of the ego right now. And the ego, remember, that's the part of me that identifies with a number of likes and dislikes and a personality that I have created. And I believe I am that kind of person, so I identify with that. Now, identifying with something it's a matter of attaching to that idea, that image, and I'm attached to that image, that identification. So part of the work that we need to do is about detaching or stop attaching to that image. For example, a very classical one, which this is linked to mind games, so we will see this more in the topic of mind games in the following course. But one of them would be identifying with the idea of being a victim. Now, this is a major issue I'm touching now, because that victim personality is going to trigger a lot of games in the mind, basically coming from the ego. And there is a lot of things that we enjoy about being the victim. Yeah, being the victim makes us want to complain in order to get something from others. Maybe their pity, maybe their energy, like, stay 2 hours talking to us and, oh my, why this happened to me? That's a complete waste of energy, that kind of complaining and asking for pity. And that comes from an over-identification with this having been the sufferer of a number of circumstances. And then you can see everybody is guilty but me. Yeah? Or you can find yourself that you are the victim one. You are the guilty one, yeah? So feeling victim the victim or feeling the guilty one, it's just another game, right? And you are things are happening to you. That would be the victim, and then you make the others guilty, or you are the one who caused trouble, and then you cannot forgive yourself. But whatever happened, it happened. It was in the past. So you're dealing with something in the present about something that happened in the past, and then you keep reliving it, and you keep drawing into that in order to get maybe some pity or maybe some justification not to do certain things that you know that you can do. You know how your life could improve. You know how you move on, how you could progress. But in order to do that would be taking responsibility for yourself and decide that you want to move on. And it's easier to stay in the pity and the complaining rather than actually moving on. So sometimes, the ego will engage that aspect of the victim personality so that we don't make the effort to move on. All right. So what do we do with that? Well, there's a number of things we can do with the ego games, but one of the things we have to do is stop that identification with the victim. And it's easier if you just if it's not just a matter of removing your identification from the victim, but actually, if I'm not going to identify with that, what am I going to identify with? So choosing to align yourself to something higher, to something greater than you, that you don't see like the sole cause of everything that is happening in your life, right? Either because sometimes if you see yourself as the victim, like everything is against you, right? And then, it's like everything is happening to me. That's karma in the worst possible way. But also, it's like if I am the one who is doing things, then I am the guilty one. It's all about the identification of the ego. You will remember ego, ahankar, like ahankar is like I am the doer in that sense, that I am the one who is doing things, therefore I am guilty. But rather than feeling I am the doer, can I connect to, something else is doing things and I am one of the characters in the game, in the play, in the movie, but I'm not the main writer of the script. And so stop feeling like everything is on you, and because that's also a lot of, it's quite an egotistical position to say that, I am the responsible for everything. Well, you're not. We are not in control of almost anything. So to keep feeling guilty for something that is not fully in your control, that's useless, and there's no way that you can deal with that. The only way you can deal with that is to change your way of thinking. So rather than to identify with the one who is creating the problems, that's if you are feeling guilty, can you identify with one who is aligned with something higher? So that would require some sort of alignment with a higher reference, some altar, something where you can bow your head. And this is where spirituality or where religion can be very useful, to bow your head and say, look, it's not in my hands, and whatever happened. It was the will of God in some ways. If God had not wanted it to happen, it would not have happened. It's not a way of taking responsibility off my shoulders. I take full responsibility, but I let it go. It's done. It's happened. I'm not going to be reliving it and punishing myself for something that was already happened. And I'm going to leave the consequences anyway, because karma is going to come. So can I stop identifying with the victim or the guilty one, and can I start identify with one who is aligned with something higher? No, am I a man of faith or not? Can I align with something higher or not? So that would be our capacity to tune in to I am, to Satnam, to something higher is gonna. The more we are aligning with that, the more we breathe the name with our breath, the less energy we are giving to all these games, and the less they are starting to affect us. So we can hear the games as they come, and then we can just let them pass without them affecting us so much. So that's another thing that we can do with. Now, of course, meditation is going to be one of the main issues to help us identify with something higher, something more spiritual. But also meditation has so many other elements, and it would be difficult to enumerate all of them. But the meditation, first of all, gives us the discipline, gives us the training for the mind to know that it's in your service. But another thing that it does is it concentrates. It gives your capacity to concentration. Dharana dhyana samadhi. One of the main problems with the mind is when the mind is distracted and you're all over the place and you're not doing what you have to do because your mind gets distracted with something else. The opposite of distraction is concentration too. So the number of steps that we have explored from, even in this diagram, we saw the pratyahara, and dharana dhyana. This is it. Dharana dhyana samadhi. These steps are going to be helping us to get out of our distracted self, the one that is going out from the indriyas. So if one of the problems of the mind is unwanted thoughts, that was one of the things. Another of the problem of the mind is distraction, being distracted. So in the level of distraction, the mind is going to help us, bring us into focus. Things like tratakam are really useful, looking at one point and don't moving the eyes from that point, keeping it still. That's going to be useful for concentration. And as we enter into meditation, dharana dhyana, then not only are we less distracted, but also we are cleaner in our filters and our subconscious garbage. This is getting clean. And so less and less unwanted thoughts are going to be coming up. We're going to talk about what to do with the unwanted thoughts in a minute, This is all like general things that we can do. Meditation often is connected to the breath, so it's going to be helpful as well to deal with emotions. And meditation is also going to open you up for intuition, and that's going to wake up your capacity to see things that are normally not seen, and you're going to be more effective. You're going to be more effective in your life in moving towards your destiny. So it's all benefits. There's nothing wrong with meditating. This is not going to have any bad effect on you, right? It's only beneficial. So why not meditate, right? So the another thing is meditation is to awaken the consciousness, and consciousness is linked to this subconscious, semi-conscious, and conscious. That would be linked to the negative mind, positive mind, and neutral mind. We talked about this when we were talking about the levels of consciousness. And so another issue about here is that to be aware that this is that the natural way to operate is that the negative mind comes first. So as soon as we are in any experience, whatever happens, the negative mind is going to be kicked in first. It's natural. It wants to protect us. And it's fine. There's nothing wrong with that, right? Can we just perceive the negative mind, what it's telling us, and then train ourselves to switch gears to the positive mind and then to the neutral mind, and eventually make the decision from the neutral mind, rather than get stuck in the negative mind, right? So as we are perceiving something and the negative mind engages, can I recognize what it's telling me? Can I grab what is good for me out of that, and then move on, switch the gears to go to the positive mind? What does the positive mind have to say? And then from the neutral, okay, the negative is saying this, the positive is saying this. Okay, can I make my choice from the neutral now? So this would be the process of moving through the three minds that is going to be helping us. So there might be more general issues. Maybe maybe they will come as I am talking. But let's talk a little bit now about the how. Let me see. 1 second. Let me just check. I have a list here of things that I can mention. Let me just check if I forgot something very important. Well, if something else comes up, I will just mention that. Okay, so we are working on all these levels. We are doing our effort on dealing with all these levels on different ways. But still, an unwanted thought comes. And the thought, let's say we perceive it. Oh, wow, I'm thinking that. Yeah, because if we don't perceive it, we cannot do anything. Consciousness is the first ingredient for change. So let's start from the point of the perspective that we are recognizing our negative thoughts. Now, if a negative thought comes, one of the approaches that we can do with it is to actually take it to the, how do you say that? To the end. Let's take it to the end. Let's take it to the, where is it going? Where is the final destination where this thought is trying to take me to, and exhaust it. So if whatever you are thinking, maybe you are afraid of something. Okay, let's try to find an example. Right, your boss is asking you to do something, and you are afraid that if you make a mistake, you're gonna be fired, let's say. And then the thought is, you don't really take it towards the deepest end, yeah? What is the final result of that thought? But if you allow it to take it to the end, oh my God, maybe I don't do this right, and if I don't do this right, then I'm gonna be fired. If I am getting fired, I'm not have any money. If I don't have any money, maybe I don't get another job. Then how am I gonna survive? And I'm gonna end up in the street. I'm gonna be a homeless, and then you just start going through this. And then you see yourself as a homeless person being attacked at night under a bridge. And then stop. When you get to the end, right? And then they attack me in the bridge and then I die. Okay, all right. Well, that's pretty grim, right? If you take it to that extreme, no wonder you are scared. But now go all the way back, and your boss was just a little bit annoyed because you didn't finish something on time, maybe. Or maybe he thought that you didn't finish something correctly. Okay, so from that comment that he did, I feel I'm going to die under a bridge. I mean, is that logical? Is that, does that make any sense to go that far? No, he's just annoyed for some reason. Or maybe I'm not even the reason. Maybe he was already annoyed and he's just expressing his annoyance with me. So taking the thought to the very end, sometimes it helps us to see the absurdity of our imagination. We have a very vivid imagination. Imagination is very powerful, but it's powerful when we put it, it's useful when this power is put in our service. Putting it against us is going to be, this is one of the reasons where we create so much anxiety that the brain, you remember the core of the brain, the reptilian brain, engages in such a strong level. This one, you remember? This engages in such a strong level that we have no chance. We are in front of a lion, so there's nothing we can do. So some thoughts which are really, really nasty, taking them to that level can help. To the level of, take it to the end. Let's see where it takes me. And sometimes we can just accept whatever it takes us. If it takes us to some crazy thought, we can just say, well, you know what? Well, if he fires me for this reason, for doing this wrong, let him fire me. Yeah? And be at peace with that. That if I have to be fired from here, then it is maybe my destiny to move somewhere else, or there's something else in store for me, and I am ready to receive it. So the moment you stop being too attached to a particular outcome, then the destiny can come. And when we are very attached to some material thing, then things are going to happen that are going to challenge us in this attachment, and it's generally not a healthy thing. Why are you so attached to this? Can you work without attachment? It's not detachment, it's non-attachment. Yeah, you are working, you have a job, the job is important, the job is giving you some security, is giving you some money, and you need that stability, and that's great. But can you work in a way that you are not totally attached to that? Because if you remember, there is like 3 levels of knots in the body, 3 granthis, 3 knots that we need to overcome. There's material attachment, emotional attachment, and spiritual attachment. And the first one is material. And if you are feeling scared for losing something that is material, then that's the lowest level that you can be in terms of consciousness. So can I do my job? Can I do it with consciousness? Can I do it with responsibility, but without attachment to that? And engage and putting all my will and my time and my effort, but without being attached to that, being non-attached to that. So in a way, when you are not attached to that level, an unreasonable thought that would otherwise take you to a crazy panic mode, anxiety mode of your mind, creating all sorts of images, then it's not going to have that effect on you. And by not having that effect, you're going to be more present. By being present, you're going to be more conscious. By being conscious, you're going to do your work better. And actually, you're going to be more effective at your job. And probably your boss is going to enjoy it more. He's going to appreciate more your effectiveness. So it's quite paradoxical that the more fear we have, the less effective we become. And we manifest the possibility, the worst possibility, because we are not operating from the highest level. Yeah, does it make sense? I hope I was able to convey that. So those thoughts are take them to that level, and also evaluate how deeper can you go with one thought. If you're starting to imagine, maybe your partner doesn't respond to a WhatsApp message. Why not? They should be available right now. They are there. I know they have their phone close to them always. So why are they not responding? What are they doing? Who are they with? What are they doing? And you start going through this kind of thought. It's just paranoid, yeah? Thought is just totally unhealthy. So some thoughts, you need to take them to the end. Some of the thoughts you need to realize from the very beginning is like, there is nothing logical to this. There's nothing, where is this coming from? Why am I going to this? I'm going through, if I'm imagining, for example, that my partner is going with somebody else, maybe that comes from a memory of being betrayed, or a memory of, or insecurity, some sort of issue like that. So if that's happening, recognize, where is that thought taking me? Oh, So she's not answering or he's not answering my messages because he's with somebody else. Okay, so I'm afraid of being betrayed. Okay, all right. So if you take the thought to the extreme, you realize that it's actually taking you to the origin. Yeah, you take it to the extreme. It's like, why am I being anxious because they are not answering my messages? Because I fear that I may be betrayed. Okay, so that means that I have a memory of betrayal in me, and that's guiding my fear. So we can deal with that. We have the memory of the betrayal. Let's deal with that. And remember this exercise that I talked before, and there's a number of things we can do to deal with that issue rather than letting the thought go on. Saddam, Sohail, welcome to the stream. Hello, good to see you here. We are talking about the problems with the mind. Yeah, how to deal with unwanted thoughts right now. We are talking on that level. So that's another thing that we can do when we detect a thought that we don't like it. Yeah, let's see where it's taking us. That's going to tell us something about where is it coming from, and let's deal with that thing that is behind that thought. Yeah. What else? Let's talk another thing that we can do with a thought. When we have a thought that is, let's say now, okay, so the thought is taking me to a place that I don't want to go. I don't like this kind of thought. Let's say that when you start thinking in that way, where it's going, and you're gonna feel worse about yourself afterwards. Well, if I detect that my thought is taking me in the wrong direction, how can I cut that? And that technique, that's what we call the Gatka. Yeah, Gatka thought. Gatka being these martial arts where they use swords and they cut. So we want to cut the thought as it's coming. Now, for this, there is a metaphor I use often. I don't know if I used it in another video. I don't know if I talked about this before, but let me just remember this. When you look at a mountain, there is a forest. And in the forest, there is lines which have been cut. Yeah, these are firewalls. Yeah, these lines are cut, these trees are cut, so that if at any point there is some fire, it doesn't spread and consumes the whole mountain. So the same thing we have to do with the mind. So we need to create a number of firewalls that when we detect a fire, and fire being one unwanted thought, we don't let it spread into everything and consume everything. Now, what does this mean? What's this metaphor? How do I apply this metaphor to the mind? Well, these firewalls are when we detect that this is the seed to something, to one of these unwanted thoughts that is going to spread. So we have a number of, I call it anti-karmas, yeah? Anti-mantras, yeah? We have a number of anti-mantras in our life, and some of them are inherited from our parents. Ways of thinking, and actual words that we repeat in our mind. Sometimes it's a sentence. Sometimes we may even hear that sentence in the voice of our mother or father or teacher or whatever. And that sentence, we repeat it to ourselves, and that's going to create a number of issues, maybe mentally, emotionally, or physically, or it's going to put us in a bad state, in a bad mood, or is our secret reason for failure, for not doing something, for procrastinating, or for judging ourselves badly. So let me put an example, yeah? Sometimes we may repeat a sentence in the mind, something like, I don't think I can do that, or I'm not allowed to do that, or I shouldn't do that, or I'm going to share something personally. This is from my family, something that I learned from my mother. She often has this, she would have this repetitive thought, not to bother, yeah? Para no molestar, we say in Spanish, yeah? She would not do something because she was afraid that doing that would bother somebody. So she would stop herself from doing or being who she wants to be or doing what she wants to do because she was afraid that it would bother someone. And that kind of thought, not to bother, it's an anti-mantra which would come to her consciousness constantly and would create all sort of karma, really. For example, she would not call me because she's afraid that she will bother me because I'm a busy man, and if she phones, she's going to be bothering me. And it's quite paradoxical because it actually bothers me that she wouldn't phone me, right? Why doesn't she phone? She could just phone me, right? It's me, always me, who phones her. But she does it out of her place that she doesn't want to bother me. So how interesting that one of these karmic thoughts, these anti-mantras, is sabotaging us to the level that is actually causing the opposite of what we want to create. So me having learned that not to bother, that's the sentence, that's the anti-mantra, I've recognized many years ago already that I inherited that from her. Because she would repeat it quite often, para no molestar, yeah? So when I would hear that, in my mind I would realize, oh my goodness, that's what my mother does. And so, by the way, I'm saying this all with all my love for my mother. I have nothing against her. She was one of the first. She was the first yogi, the first one who brought yoga to my family, coming from her brother that learned some yoga and then passed it on to her. She started, then my father, then my sister, then me. So it's like she's the jewel. She brought the jewel of the yoga to the family. So. This is not a complaint against my mother. This is a mother. It's an example on how this thing moves through generations. But she probably learned this from other generations, probably from her mother. And when she was a child, she was the only girl in a family. So there were 3 brothers. And she would not allow herself to speak because the men have... And she was the youngest girl. So the men would be having a conversation that was really... intellectually really stimulating for her in dinner time, and she would want to say something, but she didn't want to be the silly one because she was so young and they were men. So that not to bother, she would repeat it often enough that I got it in myself. So after I recognized that sentence one day when I was learning about these firewalls, I noticed that I was doing that, and I thought, wow, not to bother, this is something that I do. Oh dear. So, okay, now that I know what it is, I can be aware of that. Now, every time I'm notice this not to bother thought coming up to the surface of my mind, this is like a big firewall. When I notice that, I recognize that I'm entertaining a certain line of thinking that is going to be very karmic. So I immediately stop it and I cut it. Yeah, and I cut it and I put some mantra or something to cut it. Yeah, a general mantra that you can just use your own personal mantra like Wahuru, or a mantra that protects your mind from negative thoughts. Particularly, there is 2 of them. If you want, I can just share them right now. One would be At Guru Name, Yugat Guru Name, Sat Guru Name, Siri Guru Deva Name. Something that you've heard me chant before some meditations, and we do it every day before doing Kundalini Yoga. And let me see, there was another one from a more Hindi tradition. Om Dum Durgaye Namaha. I believe it's that one. Om Dum Durgaye Namaha. And that would be useful to cut negative thoughts. So that's when you detect that one of these anti-mantras are starting to arise on your mind. So maybe you have already been going on with that thought for a while, right? So maybe you wake up and realize, oh my God, I'm playing the anti-mantra again. And I've been doing it for the last 10 minutes, right? Something happened and I was going on and on and on with that thought. And then you wake up and you realize, whoa, I'm really negative. Look at that thought. Whoa, that's the firewall thought. Okay, let's stop it right now. Gatka. So let's cut it. And then in that very breath, you start repeating the mantra inside of you or outside if you want. If you are outside and you want to, you can do it. And you cut it at that very moment and don't let it go on. Yeah, don't let it go on. That's a way also to create a cut right here. Yeah, The thoughts are here, and then don't let it come deeper. Yeah, don't let it come any deeper. So you can do that with any kind of thought, but I would encourage everyone who is listening to explore in your life and recognize what are your anti-mantras. What is your anti-mantra? What do you say to yourself when you want to procrastinate, or when you want to avoid success in life, or when you want to go into this negative cycle that is difficult to come out? And you don't want to do that, but a secret part of you that likes to be the victim then is going to play that. By the way, complaints are also one of these anti-mantras. Yeah, maybe it's a complaint. Maybe it's like, oh, but I'm very tired. Well, maybe, but I'm very tired is one of them. And maybe you are tired. Maybe you are physically tired. But by repeating that within your head, it's not going to help. So by saying that, you're just going to be going deeper into this victim attitude and keep complaining. So remember, one of the mantras for this new year that I mentioned in the video talking about the 2024, I said, but I am committed. Yeah. So if you detect this would be another Gatka thought. Yeah, it would be a good way to cut it. If I detect, oh, I'm very tired, but I am committed. That would be a way to cut it and not to allow it to go on. And so that's another way. How is it going? Is anybody, if you are online and you want to talk about your challenges with your mind, talk about personally, we can talk about it. We can find maybe more tools on how to deal with them. What else? In order to detect a firewall, to detect one of these thoughts, the best thing you can do is to train yourself to observe the mind. So being aware throughout the day of what the mind is doing, it's key. Because otherwise, you're not going to notice. You're just going to notice when you have been going on and on for 20 minutes or 30 minutes. So a good practice is to actually observe the mind constantly in a very disciplined way. And then, for example, you can put objectives to yourself, like for the next week, I'm not going to complain a single time. So I'm going to spend one whole week without complaining. And every time you find yourself complaining, stop immediately and change the thought. So that's one possibility. And you can do this training of the mind with other things, like some of the rules for communication, for example. Yeah, one of the rules of communication is not to say anything that is not necessary, kind, and true. Necessary, kind, and true. So you can, if you find yourself throughout the week, you can, dedicate a whole week to not to say anything that is not necessary. And every time something is unnecessary, then you stop. Why should I say that? Is it even necessary to say it? So before saying anything, just stop yourself, evaluate, is it necessary? If I had to say it, then I say it, right? And what you will notice is that you're going to spend a week that is very filled with silence because we say so many unnecessary things. And then you can spend 1 week saying nothing that is not kind. If I'm going to say anything, I'm going to say it in a kind way. And kind towards the soul, not towards the ego, right? Sometimes we need to be very strong and serious with the ego. If you're dealing with some ego, but you are being kind to the soul. I mean, this exercise is just like the surface. Then we could go deeper into the exercise, but let's not go deeper today. I feel like just giving you the surface of the exercise. And then a whole week only giving the truth. So not to say anything that exaggerations, for example, omission, don't omit anything. Say the things as they are and exactly as they are, as you perceive them to be the truth. And so that would be an exercise to do every week. And then after the 3 weeks, then you can do 1 week of not saying anything that is not necessary, kind and true. And this is a good practice and training, because what we are saying is something that we are thinking. And sometimes it's difficult to notice what happens in your mind, but it's easier to notice what's happening in your voice. So by saying something, by paying attention to what you are saying, you are actually training yourself to think in that way. So if you spend 40 days training yourself to not to say anything that is not necessary, kind and true, by the end of the 40 days, you are starting, this exercise is starting to seep in, and you're starting to not think, not even say, not think anything that is not necessary, kind and true. So it's going in that level. So being aware of your words is critical to learn to be aware of your thoughts, like that. And if you notice you are complaining, or you are playing any kind of game, or maybe you're even saying an anti-mantra, like not to bother someone, then stop it. Stop yourself, notice what's happening, and go back. And it's a training, and it takes time. What you will notice is that the first days, you will say something you didn't want to say, and then you will notice afterwards, like, oh, I did it again, right? And then, okay, come back to consciousness, right? I have to be very aware of everything I say. Then a few days later, you will do it again, and then like, oh, I did it again. I said something I didn't want, I complained again. I didn't want to complain. Then another few days later, you're going to notice the moment you are complaining, not afterwards, but the moment you are complaining is like, oh, I'm complaining, okay, I stop it. A few days later, again, you notice when you are complaining, you stop it. And then a few days later, if you keep very, very steady with the practice, you will notice as you were going to say something. The moment you were going to say it, you notice, and then you just don't say it. And so now is the moment of learning. This is when you are learning, yeah? And you are changing the habit, changing the pattern of, for example, in this case, the complaining. So after a few weeks of this, after 40 days of this, training yourself, it will not even come out through your lips. You will notice before it's happening, which means that you are operating on the level of thought already. And so you are cutting the thought as it is arising. That's what we want, yeah? And that takes some time. So don't try to fix everything at once. Just one issue, one mind game. We will talk about mind games in the future, in the next course, very, very, very soon. Choose one of them and work on that. Maybe it's complaining, maybe it's an anti-mantra, one of these things. Take it, or the necessary, kind and true, take it and apply it consciously for 40 days or longer. And do it in such a way that, don't try to change everything at once. Change one thing, but it's a cumulative process. After you do 40 days of not saying anything that is not necessary, kind and true, eventually this will be integrated as you, and you will not say that. I used to say a lot of bad words when I was younger, like cursors. I used to curse a lot. It's just the environment I was in, and as a young man. And one day I decided not to do it. And then slowly, gradually, I took it off my words, and then it was out of my mind, and I don't curse anymore. And if it happens, it must be something extraordinary for me to say a bad word. So, and if I want to say it, I can say it consciously, but not unconsciously. So Hel says, I've learned from masters to be witness of the mind and not try to stop the stream of thoughts. But a nasty thought physically and energetically hurts and makes the watchfulness impossible. Right. Yes, witnessing of the mind is critical to know what's happening there. And it's not to stop the stream of thoughts, but it's to stop that kind of stream. You can let the mind continue, but not in that direction. So you are choosing to gather the river, yeah? Choose which is the direction of the stream. But let it help you. The mind is useful. The mind is necessary. We have a good mind. But it's just that it's out of control very often, and it just goes all over the place. So as we are witnessing the mind going in a particular direction, it's not to stop it, but just direct it. Yeah? If it's going in the direction of, oh, I cannot do this, I don't have enough whatever, or they are going to say whatever about me, and you're going to go into this complaining mode, don't just let it go and observe it, but is the moment you are noticing it, okay, let's gather the thoughts, let's bring it back to this stream, because otherwise we are going down that is a drain, yeah, and it's draining our energy, and without energy we cannot be aware of the thoughts anymore. We lose our capacity to be the witness of the mind. So one exercise that is often recommended when we begin yoga is to be this witness of the mind that Sohail is talking about, is to notice every thought as it arises, and when they arise, put a little label on it. Is it useful or is it not? And this is an amazing exercise. It was really useful for me when I was starting this process of witnessing the mind, to understand who I am, going through this process that I am not the mind, but then what is the mind doing? So let me check. And as a thought arises, then you check, is this useful or not? And you will realize that I'm not sure, it could be 90% of our thoughts are useless, really. And then if a thought is useless, why do I give it any energy, right? So maybe, even things that we may find that are not losing our time. Like, for example, I'm composing an email in my head. I'm thinking about what am I going to say to that person. But is it really, do you really need to do that? Do you really need to compose the email in your mind? Because you may go around the email like 3, 4, 6 times. You can be rewriting it many times. And then the moment you actually sit down to write it, it may come up something completely different. Has it happened to you? That you think about it, you have it so clear, I'm going to say this and that. And then the moment you sit down, something else comes up. And then you just write up what you have to write up. So was it useful, all those hours that you spend deciding what am I going to say to that person? No. What if that person does something to me? I would do this and I would do that and I would say this and they would say that. And we make these fantasies of situations that would arise they are never going to happen. And we imagine that if it happened, what I would do, what I would say. What a loss of energy. So that's useless. So in this exercise of witnessing the mind, as you notice some useless thought, you just put the label useless and then you just let it be and let it go away. It's like, I don't get attached to it, right? The key is not attaching to it. So we are a witness of the mind. I'm not stopping it. I'm not trying to stop it. I'm just not going to attach to that. Yeah. And but let's say that a thought comes and it's useful. So if a thought arises and it's a useful thought, I shouldn't forget to tell my sister this and that. That's an important thought, something I shouldn't forget. Well, then at that very moment, take on the mobile phone, write it down, make a note, and then when you get home and you have the chance to say that, or whenever you are free to do that, then you check the phone and you have the note there. Now, after I've written an important thought as a note in the phone or in a little notebook, I used to carry a little notebook with me, and I would do this with a notebook before smartphones. After you've written the thought, if you go back to that thought again and again and again, I shouldn't forget to tell her this, and I will tell her, then it's not useful anymore. Then it's again useless. So it's a good practice to have this like a notebook, or in this case, like a phone. You write the thought there. The thought was useful. I write it down, and then I let it go. I don't have to continuously be thinking about that until the moment I get there, right? You put an intention and then you let it be. You don't have to continually think about that. It's like saying, okay, I'm going to go to the dentist. So I book an appointment and I have it in 2 weeks' time. Good. I put it in my calendar. I don't have to think about it anymore until in 2 weeks' time when I have the day of the dentist. Then I have my calendar and I have to, plan my day ahead so that I can go to the dentist. But my intention was set 2 weeks before. I don't have to be for 2 weeks thinking I'm going to go to the dentist. What is going to happen? I shouldn't forget to go. What is the dentist going to say? What am I going to do? It's useless, right? So choosing where do we dedicate the energy, that's key. I mean, in order to do that, it's key that we are witnessing the thoughts that are useful or useless. Yeah, does it make sense? Does it make sense, Sohail, to the watchfulness, the witness of the mind that you are saying? Because if we are witnessing a thought and the thought is hurting, like you are saying, why should we want to keep nurturing it? It's not useful. Yeah. Then there's another thing, there's another level. I said that one of the ways to work on what's happening in the mind is to work on what's happening through our mouth, what we are saying, because sometimes we don't realize we are thinking something until we actually say it, and then it's out into the world, right? So practicing to the thoughts. But there's another way. There's another thing. I recognized some years ago that when I was being proud, then my face was changing. Let me go in a moment. Les says, I found that initially it's my relationship with that action of the mind. I felt like I was dependent or even addicted to listening to these thoughts. Oh yes. Once I considered how I was allowing that process to dominate my attention, when I was able to step back and hold it in awareness and deal with it. Totally. We are dependent, we are addicted to those thoughts. Yeah, if we go back to the one I was mentioning before about the victim attitude, how we are addicted to feeling like a victim for a number of reasons. It's beneficial to the ego. Not the ego, it's beneficial, let's say, to the ego because, we get pity from others, we get pity from ourselves, so we are less tough with ourselves when we have to be tough, and we are less disciplined, we don't do things that we need to do, so it's, we take less responsibility, so we get addicted to that, yeah? And even the ego itself is an addiction. Yeah? So Hel says, completely, yes, Wahiru, okay, I'm glad. But yeah, it does have an effect, an element of pleasure and satisfaction as well. It feels so good to be the victim. Yeah, exactly, that's it. It's like the alcoholic. He enjoys drinking alcohol, right? And we are all egoholic, if we can say that, right? Okay, so we are all egoholics. We're gonna set up an association, EA, yeah, Egoholics Anonymous, and we enjoy that. We enjoy allowing the ego to do its games, and we just let it go rampant. And then when things go astray, then we complain, and we enjoy complaining about that. Oh yes, it's my ego, right? Okay, let's go back to the example I was giving about the pride. Pride is one of the 5 evils. Is the 5th one, which is sometimes called ahankar as well, linked to the ego, basically. So interesting. And I realized that there is an asymmetric face expression linked to pride. How is that? I don't know if it's asymmetric or not, but it's like there is this little pulling of the lips up and a little bit in the nose, going up in the nose. There's this muscle engaging and feeling superior to somebody else or feeling proud. A little bit like that. I would feel it here particularly, but maybe like the nose, the muscles going into the nose. Do you know what I mean? So, this is like nonverbal communication. This is facial expression. But the thing is, one day, as I was speaking and I was being proud of something, I realized it. And I noticed that muscle was moving. And then I realized, whoa, what's that muscle? Oh, that's pride. And then I recognized I was being proud, not because of what I was saying, because I didn't notice how proud I was in those words, but because of the position of the muscles in my face. After that happened, that became like a firewall. So if I was talking about anything to anyone, or particularly, especially if I am teaching, if I was teaching and I would notice that muscle engaging, maybe I was talking one day, I've done a meditation for 1,000 days and it's such a good, whatever. And I was like, oh, I'm getting proud. And then as soon as I felt the muscle, it would be like a firewall, stop it. And what happened is that soon I started to recognize the muscle before I said anything. I would see the muscle before I would reply. Maybe a student asks me a question and a part of me wants to say something really, really nice. And then I would feel the muscle. I would not be aware of the thoughts, but I would be aware of the muscle, which it was a sign of that pride. So that was useful for me. I don't know if it's useful for anyone, but it was useful for me to recognize that game was coming up and I wanted to be proud. And then I would just stop and not say it. So whatever I was gonna say coming out of that spot, coming out of that place, I was just not gonna say it. So that would be a way to stop that game or that thing that I wanted to stop. Yeah. So these are ways that we can identify what's happening in the mind, because direct awareness of our thoughts is not always easy when we are not practiced. And so we could do both things simultaneously. On one side, be aware of your facial expressions, be aware of your words, and start training yourself to stop those kind of words which are going to nurture the ego and start to identify with something higher, and so bring your words to that. And then at the same time, in parallel, we start to train ourselves to be more witnesses of our mind, identify when it's something not useful and not to let it go, and then train yourself to direct the stream of thoughts. Yeah, makes sense? And that's about it. I think I'm having a feeling we are approaching the end of the conversation. If anybody wants to say something or share something or ask something, just write it in the chat. But I feel we have more or less touched superficially a good number of issues around the mind, about the brain, about the consciousness, about the ego, how to deal with them, what to do on every layer, on everything, on every level, and how yoga can be approaching all these things. Look, I consider this doing yoga, okay? If I am during the day spending 40 days trying, making a big effort to be conscious of every time I speak, not to complain, I say this is yoga. In a way, it's Gyan yoga. Yoga wisdom is a yoga of being very conscious throughout the day to change your language. So to me, that's as much yoga as doing postures, right? It's just postures in the brain. Les says, thank you. I'm excited to hear more about mind games in your upcoming talks. Yes. So I don't know if you were here before, but I said that I'm going to be doing, the next video is going to be, I'm going to be talking about artificial intelligence, probably. I think that it's important, an important conversation to have with the arising of ChatGPT and other large language models. We're going to talk about that from a perspective of yoga and as a yogi, what I feel about that. And then probably we're going to switch over to the next course. I will leave this course kind of open because maybe we will want to add some more videos in the future. But to me, we are approaching the end. So today was more a practical thing on what to do with the mind. But we're going to move on to the numerology, which I've been looking forward to this, and I'm excited. And people have been asking me to talk about numbers. So the next course is going to start with the numbers and the numbers. I'm going to do an introduction, and then we're going to start talking about the mind. So mind games are going to be covered in depth in that next course. So Hel says, great. Wahuru, excellent. Well, an hour and a half, I think is pretty good today. A bit shorter. Sometimes I go to 2 hours. I think it's a good size video. I appreciate everyone. Hafaker. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name. Thank you for subscribing once more. I don't know if it's working. Let's see this. Right. Okay. Well, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you for being in the video and watching it. Please leave if you are watching it, and it's been already recorded. Just leave your comments in the comments of the video and I will attend to those. And until next time, take care of your mind. Sadhana.